Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and I'm doing this podcast in the library with a rope.
I don't know what you're going to use the rope for in this in podcasting, but I'm glad you have a library in your house.
I like reading, Josh.
I too like reading. Yeah. Dave doesn't have a library because Dave doesn't know how to read.
I also don't have a rope.
No. Maybe you should get one. I don't know.
I'm going to give him mine for his birthday.
Ah, that's very generous of you. So in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we are talking about the films of 1985, and we are here at our flop episode to talk about a movie that is now beloved, but at the time was not by audiences or critics, really, and was a failure at the box office.
Talk about a mystery.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, it doesn't seem like a mystery after having watched this film, but we'll get into that. So it is Clue, an early example. I feel like this is the kind of movie that now we would expect to be made because it's like, hey, here's a thing people have heard of. Let's turn it into a movie. It is based on a very popular murder mystery board game that was first published in 1949. But this wasn't something I feel like that was done quite as much in this era, but it is a film that attempts to adapt the board game into a feature film and makes it into a comedy, which is another thing I feel like we see, whether it's Barbie or the Lego movie or whatever, where it's like, hey, what are we going to do with this IP? Let's make it comedic rather than trying to make it like a serious, one-to-one adaptation or whatever. And I don't think it works. And a lot of people obviously agreed with me at the time. It grossed $14.6 million on its $15 million budget. So, I mean, I suppose it could have been a bigger failure, but it didn't make its budget back. And I'm sure something like this, based on a property that so many people would have been familiar with, that they expected it to be something bigger. And this was like a major marketed release, part of the whole gimmick here, in keeping with the idea of the board game where you don't know what the solution is until you open the little envelope and find out. This movie was released with 3 different endings, with 3 different results of the murder mystery. And at the time, if you went to see the movie in the theater, you would get one of the 3 endings. And so in order to see all 3 endings, you would theoretically have to go see it 3 times in theaters, which could have increased the box office, but clearly most people didn't even want to see it.
But yeah, you didn't know which ending you were getting at the theater, right? So
I think you
see
did.
The same one.
I think you did actually know. Based on the reviews that I looked at, where they mention the endings are labeled A, B, and C, and the theater will say, I think, I believe you knew, like, you could go, oh, I saw ending A, now I'll go see ending B. So I think it's possible.
So we watching this we get all 3 endings in the whatever version that's out now, DVD / streaming / whatever. You get to watch all 3 endings now.
Yeah, you do. Although I watched it on DVD, and it did have the option where you could watch the movie with one randomly selected ending, or you could watch it with all 3. And of course,
that's fun.
Yeah,
that's fun.
But I think, people, if you're a fan of this movie and you watch it, multiple times or whatever, you might not want to see all 3 endings each time, or just have that experience like people had initially in the theater. But yeah, I think we all watched all 3 endings. And as critics note as well, at the time when it was shown to critics, they were shown all 3 endings, although regular audiences were not.
Critics noting things.
Yes. So, but again, people apparently were not super enthused about watching this movie, even though, again, it has a very recognizable property.
Yeah, this could have been our cult classic this year as well.
Yeah, it did eventually get that cult status, but at the time, despite that well-known brand that it was based on, and a bunch of talented comedic actors. This movie stars Tim Curry, Martin Mull, Madeline Kahn, Christopher Lloyd, Michael McKean. I mean, actors who were known, maybe for TV at this point or for other comedy roles. I think a cast of people that were recognizable that audiences might have wanted to see, they did not.
I think a lot of them were known for movies, but yeah, one of the things that I noticed watching this was like it felt like certain actors were performing in different tones than other actors. They didn't all seem to be on the same comedic page.
Yeah, I mean, and to me also for a movie with all of these comedy powerhouses, a lot of them felt like they were holding back from those comedic personas, and maybe they were trying to fit in to the tone of this movie, written and directed by Jonathan Lynn, based on a story Jonathan Lynn developed with John Landis, who is a producer here.
Major figure, John Landis.
Yeah.
Oh, you said, yeah, you usually argue with me that he's not considered a major figure.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he's not a major auteur, but I mean, he certainly was a driving force of like mainstream cinema in 1985.
Yeah.
He was successful, and his name as a producer probably helped get this movie made. I thought maybe you were going to mention the other relevant thing, that he is a murderer. But
John Landis is a murderer. Oh, because of that's
Twilight
true.
Zone, yeah.
You'll have to explain that to the audience, Josh. So.
I mean, he kind of pushed for unsafe conditions in his segment of Twilight Zone, the movie, that ended up killing, I believe, 3 people. So
yeah, including the famous actor who's
Vic Morrow, I think it is.
Yeah,
and children. So really,
Jesus,
yeah, good stuff here. So but relevant to and that was 2 years before this. But obviously didn't prevent him from being a force in Hollywood and helping to get this movie made. But what I was going to say though is that this movie is set up, not only is it a comedy, but it's a parody of like kind of Agatha Christie murder mysteries, and Then There Were None is clearly an influence here, as well as these old dark house movies that are, you think of from like the 1930s. Dave, I very much thought of The Gorilla, the Ritz Brothers movies, as I was watching this. But I don't know if people in the 80s were super into like parodies of those kind of musty formats necessarily, if that was the right approach here.
Yeah, but look, you're talking about people who probably know their film history, so they were probably riffing off of that.
Right. Well, the filmmakers certainly know the film history. I'm saying one of the reasons maybe audiences weren't drawn to this is because it's parodying things that mainstream audiences in 1985 maybe were not familiar with or didn't care about.
Well, Dave is single-handedly bringing the Ritz Brothers back, so they'll be good.
Yes.
I'm right.
Yes, he is. So, yeah, critics also were not into this. It got 2 thumbs down from Siskel and Ebert, and Roger Ebert in his written review said, "Clue is a comedy whodunit that is being distributed with 3 different endings, which is sort of silly since it doesn't make the slightest bit of difference who did it. That makes the movie a lot like the board game which inspired it, where it didn't make any difference either, since you could always play another game. Since none of these events have the slightest significance, the filmmakers have attempted to make Clue into a screwball comedy, with lots of throwaway gags and one-liners. Some of these moments of comedy are funny, most are not. The cast looks promising, but the screenplay is so very, very thin that they spend most of their time looking frustrated, as if they'd just been cut off right before they were about to say something interesting."
Yeah, I think a lot of the jokes fall flat even before they get the chance to say something interesting. Like, obviously we covered the Blues Brothers, and I think Landis and Kentucky Fried Movie has shown more adept comedic work there. Not to say, I mean, he was a producer, he didn't write it. So I just felt like a lot of these jokes just didn't connect at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of really, I mean, there's some clever wordplay here, I guess, but even that is pretty mediocre. And there's a lot of just belabored jokes. I mean, early on, there's a bit about like the butler played by Tim Curry having dog poop on his shoe. And how many times can we get the bit where like the character kind of wrinkles their nose and thinks that something stinks and wonders where it came from? Like they really like go to that well numerous times. Right. And, right off the bat, it's like, okay, this is the humor that we're getting in this movie.
Yeah. It's no Billy Madison.
Yeah. I guess
here's a nice piece of shit.
So Janet Maslin in the New York Times said, the setting up of the game, which entails introducing a group of suspects and their chief victim-to-be and confining all of them to a Baroque mansion, is the only part of the film that is remotely engaging. After that, it begins to drag. And though it takes only 87 minutes to arrive at one of its 3 different solutions, it has long since worn out its welcome by the denouement. The film does have a speedy pace, but that could hardly be confused with madcap humor. Instead, it involves a lot of running around through secret passages and some slapstick routines involving dead bodies. The actors are meant to function as an ensemble, but that merely means that they often repeat the same lines simultaneously.
I don't think the first act was like better than any of the rest of it. I thought it was a lot of exposition, introducing the characters, as is often the case in this style of movie. You know, like you said, it's a lesser version of an Agatha Christie type, story. So to me, it just like I was waiting the whole time for it to pick up. And the only time I really feel like it did pick up is when Tim Curry goes through those madcap explanations at the end.
See, I thought that was the worst part because it's not funny and it's just like, it's restating everything we've already seen.
Which always happens in these movies.
Yeah, well, which does. But I think this is a comedy. Like when it happens in an Agatha Christie movie, it is, first of all, it is actually illuminating something about the mystery. And as pointed out here, the fact that there's 3 different endings that all have to work means that none of the clues matter because we have to be able to have all of the characters be able to be the culprit. So there's nothing here that's actually like where you can, you watch like a Poirot movie and it gets to the point where Poirot explains what's going on and you can say, oh yeah, I saw that earlier and that's why this happened or that's what leads to that. You're learning new information. And there's no new information really learned here. And this is a comedy. So you think, okay, fine. We're doing the Poirot bit where he explains everything. So let's make fun of that. Let's subvert that. Let's put some cleverness into it. And it really isn't. It just is kind of sped up and involves all the running around. And I was like, I already saw the movie. I don't need to Tim Curry to recap the movie for me.
No, I hear what you're saying. Maybe I'm just talking about, I think from a performance aspect, that's really impressive what he was able to do in that style. But it's okay, man. I see it on your face. You know he's in failing health, and you still want to trash him.
No, I mean, I think Tim Curry is trying really hard here, and in those sequences too. And I don't think it's his fault. I think he's been let down by what he's asked to do, and he's putting every effort into it, and it shows, not in a good way. But he's definitely giving it his all. Versus some of these other actors who I feel like maybe either they're not giving it their full effort, or maybe they've been told to underplay, and so they're not distinctive here.
I agree with you, man. Like, we just talked about the dynamic performance of Christopher Lloyd in Back to the Future, and I think I get it. The character's a little, this is the serious scientist versus the eccentric scientist. But even Martin Mull, who's always so funny in everything, is like not funny at all in this thing. I think it's, you got all these guys, McKean, all these guys who are like great comic actors who I don't think are given the reins to go.
Yeah, McKean and Lloyd and Mull, all of them are like way too understated for what that they're able to do. Madeline Kahn also, I mean, she has that one that like the most famous thing I feel like I've seen memes of it before I'd ever seen this movie is in one of the, it's only in one of the endings. So even like a third or 2/3 of the people who saw this movie didn't even get to see it. But her bit about flames on the side of my face.
It's brilliant when she does that. Yeah.
And that was an improvised bit. And I feel like most of this movie doesn't feature improv. And what she's asked to do in the script is like just boring compared to, you have that one moment you're like, oh, here she's allowed to kind of go off. And the rest of the time she isn't. And it's just not particularly.
I mean, to me, what that shows is like, and I know this director has made other good comedies, but like it shows that the genius of Mel Brooks, how to use a performer to their maximum comedic effect.
Yeah, and that's just not going on here at all. So finally, Paul Atanasio in the Washington Post said, Jonathan Lynn's background is as a theatrical and television director, and he hasn't got a cinematic eye, although he has got an eye for something. Throughout, he seems most interested in the female bosom, either
Mm.
Colleen Camp's or Lesley Ann Warren's or both. And
Mm.
that ends up being what's most interesting about Clue. It's a kind of dueling cleavages. What's worst about Lynn, though, is that he's assembled a cast of fine, even brilliant comic actors, and then never leaves them alone so that they all play at the same dull level. Instead of giving Christopher Lloyd, Martin Mull, Lesley Ann Warren, and the rest some elbow room for improvisation, he's constantly harrying them with the hup, 2, 3 of the plot, herding them into a group.
Mm. I would agree. Also, Madeline Kahn heaving bosom as well. We could have not as much showcased here. I think we could all agree. But what are you going to do?
Yeah, I
What are
mean,
you going to do?
it definitely seems like Colleen Camp, who plays the French maid, like was given, the only character trait she has is bosomy. I mean, they really go all out with that.
She got her start in like kind of the swinging cheerleaders in the 70s. So she was like I don't want to say a softcore actress, but she definitely did a lot of like, kind of raunchy sex movies, I'd say. So I think that was cast for that reason.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that character type, like, oh, the saucy French maid who's sexy and she's dressed inappropriately, like that's something recognizable, and you could make it funny or subvert it or parody it. And I think he just doesn't.
Yes. And going back to Mel Brooks, like I think we see that with the Madeline Kahn character in Blazing Saddles.
Yeah. Or is it Terry Garr in Young Frankenstein?
Yes,
maybe?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing, is that like, and you could apply it to all of these character types that like, there's nothing here that is parodying, or there's nothing really satirical. Like this is set in 1954 for no reason. It doesn't have any like comedic commentary on the time period, on like the Red Scare. They mention communism. They mention, the nuclear fears, or the House Un-American Activities Committee, or Michael McKean's character being like a closeted gay man. None of these things are presented in any way that has like satirical bite to it.
Yeah, it's just lobs, like the softball first punchline is the best without trying to look any deeper.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's like, you need this movie to be funny, and it is.
Plenty of people disagree with us. As we were getting ready for this season, this was one of the most suggested films that people wanted us to cover. The public wants us to talk about it, Josh.
And here we are talking about it. But yeah, I mean, I tried to find, I like looking through reviews, I usually try to find some kind of variety. And I thought, okay, is there a critic from the time period, not now, where there's a lot of retrospectives when this is re-released or put out on home video? There's reviews of it now that are positive, but were there critics at the time who were into it? And I did not find any. So this really changed its reputation. But I'm with the initial reaction, really.
It's interesting because you're usually one of these guys who likes to wait before you give a referendum on a film. But now you're going the opposite way on it, Josh.
Well, I mean, I think this movie is 40 plus years old. So, I mean, how much longer do we need to wait?
No, but I'm saying the reassessment, you're like, no, the original was right. Usually you're like, no, we got to wait a few years before we really can judge this thing.
Yeah, but again, we've waited 40 years.
But no, you're missing the whole thing, Josh.
I guess I am.
You're still saying the original assessment was right, and all of this reassessing was wrong. So it goes against.
Usually, I agree with the reassessment, is what you're saying,
and the idea that films should not be assessed until later down the line.
Well, I mean, I think that films can be assessed at any time. I think it's interesting to see how the assessment changes. And even though I agree with the original evaluation of this movie, it doesn't mean that it's wrong to reassess it or that people can't do that. I mean, I think we might have talked about this when we talked about Ishtar, which is another movie that was like totally torn apart when it was originally released and has been reclaimed in a lot of ways. And I think the original assessment on that one was right as well.
I agree. I agree with you on that, Josh.
So but yeah, it certainly has changed. And at the time, no one was particularly into this, right? Again, audiences stayed away, critics were not fans, and it took a long time for it to actually get that reassessment. So, I mean, and maybe one of the reasons why I don't have that, assessment or whatever is because I feel like in a lot of ways, it's nostalgia that maybe people who saw this movie as kids and weren't part of the paying audience or weren't critics or whatever, but happened to catch it later on, it was something, a childhood favorite maybe, and that they have an attachment to it. And I never saw it as a kid, and I had not seen it until I just watched it a few days ago. So for me, it was just like, who cares about
But that doesn't matter. That shouldn't matter. I mean, we're going to get to one later this season. That's a favorite of kids that I didn't see as a kid. And we've talked about other ones like this, but that you can still love,
Oh yeah, of course. No, I just think that there is a level of nostalgia. And I mean, I have that too. And sure, sometimes I have the experience of watching a movie that I loved as a kid and thinking, why did I like this? But there's plenty of times when I watch a movie I loved as a kid and I can see, okay, maybe it has this or that flaw, but like I still do love it. And as much as I want to feel like I'm a, detached critic or whatever in some ways, like nostalgia plays into that. And I think that that's a factor here, that I don't have and that I assume you don't have. I mean, when did you first see this?
No, I honestly just first saw it maybe 2 years ago. Scarlett and I watched it right around Halloween, which is now a Halloween classic, I guess people would assume. And
Okay.
I liked it better that time than this time.
And Dave, did you watch this as a kid?
I had never seen it, and this has been on my watch list for a while now because every time one of these modern whodunits, which I'm sure we'll get into the legacy later, but people bring it up as a puzzle piece all the time. So
right, it's very Knives Out-y.
Yeah, I guess. Although again, it's meant to be like a parody of that stuff. And Dave, I know you love parodies. Have you seen Murder by Death, which is a big like precursor to this?
Yeah, that's on my watch list too. I really want to watch that. But I do think the Knives Out movies kind of ride the line between being an homage and being a parody kind of a little bit. I mean, they are playing with the whole conventions and everything.
Yeah, that's right. I guess I just feel like this is such a limp, unsuccessful parody that...
Yeah.
It's hard to be limp with so many hefty bosoms, but it happens.
That is true. The male characters are not limp in this movie. They're definitely like the filmmaker. They are very focused on the bosoms here, or at least most of them are. So, anything else you want to say about the background of this movie, Jason?
Clue is a board game.
That it sure is, and a popular. Did you play the board game as a kid?
Yeah, I like the board game. I'd still like to. I'd play it again. Yeah, there's some like weird background stuff on here that Landis invited Tom Stoppard, Stephen Sondheim, and Anthony Perkins to write the script. Very strange combination of people. Carrie Fisher was originally Miss Scarlet, and Rowan Atkinson was going to be playing Wadsworth. So some interesting stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, Rowan Atkinson, I feel like, has played very similar types of characters, and it makes sense. The reason that Anthony Perkins and Stephen Sondheim were brought in probably is because they wrote The Last of Sheila, which is another kind of cult classic mystery movie. So I'm guessing that was why. But maybe they would have done a better job. Tom Stoppard certainly. I mean, if you're trying to make a movie with witty wordplay, I think he's a guy that you would want to get in here. Yeah.
Jonathan Lynn screened His Girl Friday for the cast as inspiration on how to deliver their lines. Apparently, none of them watched it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's aiming for that like rat-a-tat, screwball comedy stuff, and it just misses.
It misses, yeah. So, and I'm not knocking those performers because we know so many great performers. I think, just it's a miss from the director who went on to do better things.
Yeah, I mean, and he is the writer here. Landis is credited as a story. With the story, but Lynn is the sole credited screenwriter and he's the director. So I really feel like this failure has to fall at his feet. So we'll come back and talk more of our general thoughts on Clue. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1985, we are talking about the flop that is Clue. And I obviously was not a fan. Jason, I feel like you like this more. Are there elements that worked for you in this film?
I think the first time it's just like one of those like, oh, it's an 80s movie that's got such a reputation and I hadn't seen it and I maybe got caught up with it. And then this time watching it, you're focused more on the actual dialogue and the plot movements and it just kind of grinds. Like it takes a lot of... It takes a lot to just move anything along here, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very belabored setup. We have to figure out why are these characters all given their kind of goofy code names from the Clue game, Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet and Mrs. Peacock and all this that presumably would not really be. I mean, some of them sound like they could be real people's names, but a lot of them do not. And so we have all of these people show up kind of one by one at this house, and we introduce them, and Tim Curry is going back and forth to the door, and we get the endless joke about the dog poop, and it just kind of, we spend so much time getting them all together in a room, and then like, why are we here? And we go around the room with what each of them have done. And I don't remember, I should have noted down how long it takes to get to the point where we actually get the first murder, but it takes a little while. Mr. Body, who shows up, who is, at least according to some of the endings, the guy who has been blackmailing them all, played by punk rocker Leaving from Fear. He finally drops dead, and that sets things into motion with the plot. But I feel like by that point, I was already checked out on it.
And there are things that I found incredibly lazy. Like, is this the dumbest policeman that's ever been on film? Like the policeman comes in and he's just like, hey, something's going on? Why did you lock me in here? Nothing's going on? Why are you locking me in here again? It's like, he can't tell that anything's wrong with this thing. It was just kind of a very weak character to me.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the characters who seem to be unrelated, we learn later on that they were all part of this conspiracy that Mr. Body has to blackmail people. But I think the cop was not. So his behavior really doesn't make any sense, even in retrospect. But yeah, I mean, this is not a tightly plotted murder mystery. And I think that's fine because it's a comedy. And if I was laughing the whole time, I wouldn't be like, oh, wait, but how does this logically work with this? But because it wasn't funny, I definitely noticed the loose, sort of lazy plotting, as you're saying. And also, this is based on a game that's all about like solving a murder mystery. So you maybe expect that it would have a bit more of that to it.
I did think they did a good job of like the rainy night in the old mansion, which is a classic film trope. It set the mood right. It just didn't deliver the goods. And there's some weird stuff in there, like the whole explanation of Miss Scarlet, how they get her is she goes, like she's eating and like, this is one of my favorite recipes. Not like, who would ever say that like about a dish that they're eating? You would identify the dish that you're eating, and you wouldn't just be like, this is one of my favorite recipes. It's just a very staccato, mechanic piece of dialogue that doesn't really make sense in the way humans speak.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's one of the few things where they actually like put that in there so that they can reference it later,
right?
as
Exactly.
a clue. But there isn't really very much of that. If there was more of that, again, if it all added up in a more coherent way during that endless exposition at the end, you might think like, oh, this was actually kind of clever. But it isn't. And I think like it all comes back to the idea that we have to have 3 different endings. So we have to make it possible for all of these people to be the culprit, where if you explain why so-and-so did it, it makes sense just as much as if you explain why this other person did it. Or, I mean, we get to the end, like in the third ending, where, I mean, ultimately, I think there's 6 people who end up dead over the course of the movie. And in the third ending, like each of them has been killed by a different person. So essentially every single character has to be able to be the murderer, and It has to all add up. And so then there's nothing.
Yeah, the third ending is the real Agatha Christie style ending. But I agree with you that they out-clevered themselves. They tried to be so clever that they made it not clever at all.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely isn't clever. So, I mean, which ending was your favorite?
The credits.
Man, that is hard.
No, I mean, I would have loved it if that ending, that third ending where everyone's guilty, would have worked. But at that point, I kind of was out on this thing. Dave, what did you, this is your first time watching it. What did you think?
I just, when I watched it, I didn't realize the whole thing about the 3 separate endings and that they showed it different ways. And so I watched them all back to back, just thinking that's how the movie ends. And that kind of took me out because I was like, it just felt like a cop out in that moment. Whereas I was actually enjoying the movie. I'll stick up for our wonderful listeners and say that I was enjoying this movie for the first 90 minutes. I thought it was a little too long and it wasn't as funny as it needed to be, but overall I did enjoy it. But then it's just like, okay, ending, and then, oh, no, this is actually how, oh, no, this is actually how. And like you said, with the final one, it's like everybody did it. So it made it all kind of pointless in a way. But because I was being entertained for those first 90 minutes, I still had a good time with the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think also one of the reasons why it doesn't work to watch all three endings is because they use a lot of the same lines and the same bits. And if you only saw one of them, you would be like, oh, okay, fair enough. And if the movie was designed from the start to be like, oh, here's three different possibilities, I feel like there would have been more variation in the jokes, in the dialogue, in the explanations, but there isn't. And so, I mean, it's fair to say like, okay, well, the filmmakers intended it to be seen with only one ending. And now everyone watches it with two endings or with three endings because like you said, Jason, that's how, I mean, even early on in that Siskel and Ebert review, Ebert says, well, clearly when they release this on video cassette, they're going to have to put all three endings on it. And he's right, they did. So from very early on, people were watching this at home with all three endings, and it just does not work.
Well, maybe we need to watch it on video cassette to make that assessment for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, although I think if I had chosen the option on the DVD to watch it with just one ending and assessed it that way, I don't think I would have liked it that much more, because the ending is, whichever ending you end up with, is still haphazard because of that reason, that they need to open it up to the possibility that anyone could have done it.
Well, Josh, you're trashing this thing. What did you like about the movie?
I mean, I think there are some funny lines, some just dumb little wordplay. I think one of the reviews cites this actually as like a weak line, but I did like, there's a line where I think it was Lesley Ann Warren or maybe it was Eileen Brennan, but one of the female characters asks Yvette, the French maid, where is there like a ladies' room or something like that? And, she says, oui, madame, down the hall. Or
no, I'm just going to powder my nose.
Right, exactly. And that's just such a dumb joke. But stuff like that made me laugh. And I feel like there's a handful of lines like that. And I would have preferred that. Like, this should be more like a Zaz movie. This should be full of deadpan one-liners. These are all actors who really can deliver that. You mentioned Mel Brooks with Madeline Kahn, and all of these actors are more than capable. Like, Michael McKean with Spinal Tap, which was the year
Any
before
of the Christopher Guest things.
Right, yeah. And then later in Christopher Guest movies, like, these are the people who can do that. And Jonathan Lynn just does not give them the material except every now and then. So I did like some of those. There were a handful of times where I kind of chuckled like, oh, that's a fun little line. But most of that stuff just falls flat.
To me, it was, I also think they could have done a better job of like showcasing, like there's so many secret passages at the end. It's like, it would have been nice to have a little allusion to one at the beginning or somewhere in there. So it just didn't feel very contrived, but, that's how it goes sometimes, buddy. But I am going to tell you this. We're going to get a lot of blowback, and I look forward to it. Tell us what we are missing on this one, because we know a lot of you love it.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard for me to see, like, this just comes off as, like, I mean, sure, there's tons of comedies from the 80s, probably featuring these actors or other, like, famous actors that we think of as great comedy stars, and there's a lot of misses, from this period, and that are not beloved necessarily, or certainly not beloved by as large an audience. And to me, this just came off as like another one of those. And other than, again, the nostalgia factor, or maybe the factor of like having played the game and it's fun to see these aspects of the game brought to life in an amusing way, I struggle to figure out what people would love about this movie.
Well, we're going to hear from our loyal listeners, and they'll tell you, Josh.
I hope so. Yeah, I'm happy to hear from them. And I was hoping, based on your ratings, that maybe you were a little more enthused that we would get a bit more of a variety here in our opinions. But it seems like we're mostly in agreement on this.
Have you ever plotted a murder?
I have not, unless it was perhaps for like a story. I feel like you and I once talked about doing a murder mystery, or more maybe like a slasher movie type thing in a cabin in the woods type deal.
We did.
It's hard, I will say, and I've tried to do this on my own with various ideas and never gotten really very far with it, because it's hard to plot a murder mystery. Like, I give a lot of respect to people who can put together something where it will end up at the end where you're like, oh yeah, that happened here and that happened here, and this connects to this, and it all fits. You watch one of those Benoit Blanc movies, for example. It's really impressive how Rian Johnson makes all those pieces fit and also still makes it an entertaining movie with characters that are fun to watch and good dialogue and all of that stuff. So I will, give respect to the creators of these movies, but I feel like Jonathan Lynn is not, he's not in that league here in terms of crafting that kind of story.
Well, I think you've picked on him enough, Josh.
All right. Have you tried to plot a murder mystery, Jason?
I'm actually working on one right now. I'm not there yet, so I haven't gotten it. I've done one comedy that has it's not a murder mystery, but there's a secret organization bad guy reveal, and I think the reveal is good, but I think again I should go back and add a little more to the foundation earlier on, so when we get there, it kind of hammers it home a little better.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really difficult thing, I think, as a writer. And when it's done well, it seems effortless. Like, oh, that clearly follows from this, and it all comes together. And you got the detective character, whether that's Poirot or Benoit Blanc or whoever, who is giving you, feeding you all of it, and they've figured it out. And they seem smart because they figured it out, and they've been written that way. And nobody in this movie seems smart. None of these characters seem like they know what's going on.
The Knives Out movies we like, but and they're really fun. But I think we can all agree the second one kind of doesn't live up to what we are expecting from them. So I agree with you. It's hard to kind of hit that level often, and it just shows what a genius Agatha Christie was.
Yeah, I mean, and I've watched, for a while, I wrote a column about Agatha Christie adaptations. So I've watched a ton of movies and TV series based on her stories. And even the adapters of those, like having to find ways to present Christie's mystery in a way that makes sense for a film audience, that takes a level of skill. And if they change elements of the story, does it still add up in the way that it did in the book? And she is great at that. And some people who adapt her stories are also great at it, and some of them are not as great at it. But I mean, it's very much the kind of thing where I think you can add the comedy and you can add the whimsy. And then There Were None is a big influence here, which has been adapted multiple times. And there's a Rene Clair version, and he's a very whimsical filmmaker. And I think he brings that to it while also making it a good murder mystery.
I was going to say, how much, I know you were talking about the nostalgia aspect, Josh, how much of this is the shared collected love of Tim Curry, is they're looking back at this and loving it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And he's great. I mean, all of these, there's a lot of love for most of the performers here, certainly for Michael McKean, for Christopher Lloyd, for Madeline Kahn. But yeah, Tim Curry has gotten that status, and
it's more of a showcase for him in that regard, versus a lot of his other roles in more supporting things. Whereas here, he's kind of the head of the show.
He is. And I think if you see, lists of great Tim Curry performances, this would be right alongside Rocky Horror and, playing Pennywise in It or whatever. So like I said, he's clearly trying, but I feel like it shows in a way maybe that those other performances don't. So, I mean, Jason, did you appreciate Tim Curry here?
Well, that's what I said. I really like that kind of, just from an acting standpoint, that madcap explanation. That's hard to do what he did at the end. Mm-hmm. Whatever you feel about the dialogue, I thought his performance, is obviously the performance you watch on this thing. But I do agree with you. The funniest standout moment is the Madeline Kahn improv there.
Yeah, that is. And I think it shows you this is the very, very end. I think it's in the third ending in the way that the endings are laid out on the home version. And by that point, it's oh, we're nearly done, but finally she's showing what she could have brought to this movie and didn't, or wasn't allowed to. So I feel like maybe we've crapped on this enough. Should we rate this out of 5 dead bodies?
Sure. You love the dead bodies, man. I mean,
it's appropriate here, is it not?
I will give, the first time I watched it, it was 3. This time I would have given it 2.5. So I think that's my answer, because like multiple endings, you have multiple ratings for me on this one.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to give it to 2.5 dead bodies. I mean, I've been very negative, but I didn't hate it. A part of what I dislike is that, there's potential here. There's enough almost funny, almost clever things here that to make it disappointing. So 2.5 dead bodies for me. Dave, how do you rate this?
I'm going 3.5. I still had a good time with it, even if I didn't think everything worked.
All right. Well, you're being very generous, but our listeners will appreciate your assessment then.
All right.
So we'll come back and talk about the legacy of Clue. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1985, we have been talking about Clue. And even though this movie was a flop, I feel like its reassessment and cult classic or even just regular classic status at this point has made it a major part of the Clue lore.
Clueniverse?
The Clueniverse. There you go. That's a better word for it. And Clue, the board game, still exists. And I think like a lot of board games, it's had numerous variations that have been released to kind of refresh it for different audiences or get people to buy multiple versions. And some of the additional characters like Wadsworth the Butler that were created for the movie have been incorporated into different versions of the board game over time. So I don't think I've ever played anything other than like essentially the classic version. Jason, did you ever play
that's no, but I would. But we used to play it a lot in elementary school. When researching this, I didn't know, was it called Cluedo or Cluedo or Cluedo beginning?
Yeah, it's called Cluedo everywhere outside of North America, it originated in the UK, and it's a play on Clue and Ludo, which is the name, I believe, from what I was reading, it's their name for what we would call Parcheesi. And because that's not familiar to American audiences, they changed it here and just called it Clue. But I think it's still called Cluedo in Europe and everywhere else.
Why do I know that about Ludo? That's really weird.
I don't know.
Weird factoid. All right, cool. Yeah.
Bad news for the rest of the world. We just put a tariff on Cluedo.
Yeah, exactly. If you call it Cluedo, you're going to get charged an extra 25%.
That's right. No, it's a fun game, obviously, and you should play it.
Yeah, I haven't played it in a long time, but I feel like even as an adult, maybe I played it with family or something like that. So, Dave, was this a board game that you ever played?
No, I never played Clue, but I did play Parcheesi.
All right, well, there you go. So, did you ever play a Clue video game? There have been multiple video games based on it.
Yes, as well. I'm almost certain I played a Clue video game back in the day, but yeah, back in like the early 80s or whatever when I was a little kid. So it's been a long time. So
yeah,
when you were wearing your karate gi.
Yep, you know it.
It's been adapted in multiple different ways. Game shows, not here, but in multiple countries, and this totally makes sense to be adapted into a game show. It's been adapted for the stage multiple times. It's interesting. In 1985, there was a stage play based on the game, not related to the movie. In 1995, there was a stage musical based on the game, also not related to the movie. And I think this speaks to the evolving popularity of the movie, because by the time in 2017, they created yet another stage adaptation, which was not a musical, that is based on the movie, and that's the one that became a success. Those two earlier stage versions didn't really go anywhere, but the 2017 version has gone on tour, has been performed in lots of high schools, is very popular, and it's the one that follows the movie.
Well, there's also a novel of the movie, so I guess that tracks. Josh, have you ever seen the episode of Psych called 100 Clues that features Martin Mull, Christopher Lloyd, and Lesley Ann Warren as suspects, and has multiple endings? One for the East Coast, one for the West Coast.
I was not really a fan of Psych. I feel like Psych is another thing that's like fake clever, but people love Psych.
People love all those USA shows that were like a bit tart, a bit randy.
Yeah, I mean the Blue Skies era of USA. I like a lot of those shows too. I was a fan of Royal Pains and Burn Notice, but never liked Psych for whatever reason. So I have not seen that.
Pacific Blue.
I've also not seen the 2011 Clue TV series, which was more for like a kid audience, which also I think makes a lot of sense. And there's always, because this is still a popular game and it's a popular IP, there's always discussion of maybe they're going to remake this movie, or I think Netflix currently has rights to Clue to potentially adapt into like a reality competition show. all of that stuff makes perfect sense. I'm sure we'll see more of that in the future.
Yeah, names I've heard for the remake: Gore Verbinski and Ryan Reynolds on one, and then Jason Bateman and James Bobin on the other. I mean, those are actors that would make sense in a piece like this.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think we really need it, but certainly those are people, like you said, who would make sense to put something like that together.
You've trashed Jonathan Lynn really all the way through, Josh. I've never seen his TV show Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister, very popular, but I do know that My Cousin Vinny is a great movie that he made, and The Whole 9 Yards was so successful that it had a sequel, The Whole 10 Yards.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen The Whole 9 or 10 Yards. He isn't involved with the sequel, but My Cousin Vinny is great. But I think if you look at his movie career outside of My Cousin Vinny, it's a lot of sort of mediocre comedies, and also ran comedies with big stars. He directed Steve Martin in Sergeant Bilko. He directed Eddie Murphy in The Distinguished Gentleman. I mean, movies that aren't particularly...
I've seen both of those.
Are they good?
I've seen both of those.
Yeah. And I have not, but for whatever reason I've seen, in part maybe just because they came out as I was reviewing movies and would see whatever was released. I think his two last films thus far, The Fighting Temptations with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Beyonce, and Wild Target with Bill Nighy as a hitman who falls in love with Emily Blunt. And that age gap does not work in that movie.
It can happen. So. If you're a hitman, you don't see age. You just see murder.
I just think that it just didn't work. So no, both of those totally forgettable. And I feel like that's really the way to describe all of those movies, except My Cousin Vinny, is just like forgettable. They're not the worst movies ever, but they're not anything that people are particularly fond of.
Of actors we haven't discussed on this show, Eileen Brennan, Mrs. Peacock, Best Supporting Actress nom for her great work in The Last Picture Show, a piece we bring up here often. And Private Benjamin, another supporting actress nom, and she won a Golden Globe and Emmy for reprising her role in Private Benjamin. I don't know if we've talked about Michael McKean, but Laverne and Shirley, SNL, Spinal Tap, all the Christopher Guest movies coming up, and one of the all-time great winners on Celebrity Jeopardy, Josh.
Oh, I have not seen that, but certainly, again, I think this goes to like so many of these people where we could just list, make long lists of the great comedy work that they've done. We haven't talked about Michael McKean before, I don't think, or Martin Mull, who is, he's mostly known for TV. I remember him as Roseanne's gay boss.
Yes.
He was great as the principal on Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And of course, whenever this is relevant, we have to bring up Miracle Beach, which he also appeared in.
I didn't realize that, but I thought, the lore that Josh and I were going to write the second one. But I always remember him in one of the all-time great comedic turns as Gene Parmesan, the worst detective ever in Arrested Development, who would wear very lame disguises that would always confuse Lucille. Gene Parmesan, you got me again. So.
Yeah, I mean, so much there that we can talk about. Again, that's like super memorable for these actors. I feel like I should mention Eileen Brennan was also in Murder by Death. So she was in both of these well-known kind of murder mystery parodies from this period. We haven't talked about Lesley Ann Warren either, but she is incredibly prolific and she is still working. I just saw her in this random indie movie where she played the main character's mother, called Love Danielle, that I reviewed in my VOD column like a couple months ago. And she's got multiple low profile movies that she's working on. So, she's still very busy.
Best supporting actress nod for her for Victor Victoria, and a lot of TV work there. Colleen Camp, we already said, but she did a lot of other movies too. Police Academy, Apocalypse Now, Valley Girl, Election. And that's it. And Bill Henderson, who's the cop, Silver Streak, and he was a big time jazz singer, has a lot of credits. So good stuff.
Yeah, all these talented people. Jane Weedland from the Go-Go's, who plays
cool places.
If you want to check out our episode on the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where we talked about Tim Curry, our episodes on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Back to the Future, where we talked about Christopher Lloyd, and our episode on High Anxiety, where we talked about Madeline Kahn. So great stuff in the Awesome Movie Year archives.
Yeah, the canon of Awesome Movie Year, the catalog, Josh.
Yes, extensive catalog. So anything else you want to say about the legacy of Clue, Jason?
You did it, Josh. You did it.
With the wrench in the office.
With your acerbic words in your living room.
I definitely killed Jonathan Lynn with my criticisms there.
I agree.
I think. So that's Clue, and that's this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can tell us who done it online and on social media.
Yeah, make sure you rip into Josh really hard on this one. Tell him about all the failings he's doing as a human being, not just on this one subject. AwesomeMovieYear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. If you review it on the Letterboxd, tag Awesome Movie Year. I'm Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy on all the things. Find me on Letterboxd. Go for Jason.
Check out some old things from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I'm at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky and on Letterboxd. And check out our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on social media at PiecingPod.
Jason, what's in our next episode?
Josh, we're taking our annual trek back to Cannes. What fun we have when we're over there. It's the Palme d'Or winner, When Father Was Away on Business.
So tune in next time for When Father Was Away on Business, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.